You're either pregnant or you're not.
Always in the car crash.
South Africa seemed nervous for once.
Very impressive, very impressive.
French rugby is on top of the world as Six Nations champions and the biggest rugby audience on the planet. There are plenty of videos on YouTube talking about French rugby as a culture, including on this channel. But in this video, I want to talk about French rugby as a science. I want to understand their playing DNA. Using video and data analysis, I'm going to pick out my top 5 key attributes for French rugby and explain why it makes them unique. But more than that, I decided that if I truly want to understand how French rugby teams play, I need to go and see one in person.
And where better to do that than at a Rugby World Cup? So I'm here in Northampton to see not just France, but also the Springboks. Let's do this.
Now, I know that some people won't like me using women's rugby to support my arguments, but as I'll go on to explain, the similarity in traits between both men's and women's French rugby only goes to show just how deep this DNA runs. Attribute number 1. You can't talk about French rugby without talking about the scrum-half. All teams rely on the number 9, but France takes this to a different level. If we look across the top French teams, we see that the star player is usually the number 9.
So the game's only 5 minutes old, but already I can see that Pauline Bourdon-Sansouz, the French 9, she's never been more than 5 meters from the ball. She's absolutely in the thick of everything, telling people what to do.
So to understand how French rugby teams play, we must first understand how their 9s play. Let's talk about their passing first. If we break down scrum-half's passing by average speed and average distance, we see an interesting trend. In both the men's and women's Six Nations, the French scrum-halves pass the ball over the shortest distance and at the slowest speed. Now, this doesn't mean that they have slow service, but it does tell us about the width of French teams' play. And we'll talk about that more a bit later on. Next, let's talk about box kicking. We see that French 9s box kick much less than most of their rivals. And we see that those box kicks take on a very different shape. Last Six Nations, Andre Dupont's box kicks were on average at least 5 meters longer than any of his rivals, and the hang time was no longer. And what this tells us is that the high and short contestable box kick aimed at retaining possession is a less critical to the French game plan compared to everybody else. Long kicks are an essential part of the French rugby game plan, and we also see this when we look at the kicking of the fly halves. In the last Six Nations, Romain Untermack kicked the ball on average the second furthest of any 10, and in the women's Six Nations, Carla Arbez actually kicked the ball further on average than any fly half, men's or women's, in the entire tournament.
Geez, I would love to play 10 in this team. I think because it's so much off 9, your eyes can go a lot wider than just looking at the ruck, looking at what's in front and maybe seeing a bit of kick space behind. You can watch the corners. If the corners get wide, whenever the 9 hears your voice, he knows you've seen something, which makes your communication process a lot easier.
And I think that really feeds into their 22 exit success, which was the best of any team in the Six Nations. And they were also the most likely team to exit their own 22 via a kick. Let's move on to point number 2. Offloading. The French have been pioneers of low ruck count rugby, and offloading is a key enabler for this. In both the men's and the women's Six Nations, France offloaded more than any other team. And what's funny about offloading in rugby is that quite a lot of coaches really don't like it at all.
What happens with offloading? You'll have 1 or 2 and it looks brilliant, spectacular, and you'll go, yes, because always in the car crash, 1 offload too many.
When I went through our stats, we had very low number of offloads. It's obviously a place where you can lose ball and then you're in trouble because it's a transition and you're not ready to defend.
Being an offload team is kind of like being pregnant. You're either pregnant or you're not. The problem is that all coaches, attack coaches, want to go into the season saying, we're going to be an offload team. And then in the first game, after the first 2 that go to ground, they go, no more 50-50, stop the offloads. You need to give the players license to say, we are going to drop a couple, but geez, we're gonna make a couple and we're gonna get them under pressure. So let's just stick with it.
So that makes it even more impressive that the French not only offload the most, but they have the best offload success.
Once they get that one offload becomes 2 offloads, becomes 3 offloads. That's when they get teams in trouble, and then they play on top of them. They keep them on the ropes.
On the subject of offloading, it's actually not as common as you might think in the top 14. In fact, quite a lot of top 14 games are very played between the 22s, lumbering slugfests of games. It's only really Toulouse and Bordeaux who are the offloading masters. And wouldn't you know it, Toulouse and Bordeaux are the top 2 teams in France, not just in men's rugby, but also in women's rugby.
And that leads us to my third key facet of French rugby, space. Now, if you look at the stats, you'd be forgiven for thinking that the French have somewhat of a confusing relationship with space. We said earlier how the French scrum halves tend to pass slow and short, and the stats tell us that French movement tends to be the tightest of any nation. In fact, they are the team least likely to play wider than the second receiver. But this doesn't mean that they don't like space. What this shows us is that the French like to get the ball to space fast.
The French are really starting to express themselves. They're really starting to throw the ball to space and move the ball to space quick. If there's space, they just get the ball to it as quickly as possible, whether that's a kick pass, a long pass. It's not about structure, it's not about controlling where the contact is, it's about avoiding contact. It's about getting the ball in the hands of the good players in time and in space.
And then once they're in that space, I think there's a very strong argument to be made that the French are the best at finishing try-scoring chances of any nation in the world.
Because they've got that mindset. Once they get into that unstructured stuff, that's when they light up. That's when they'll put everybody in there. You can have a look at the top view or the back view. It's like they've got no rules.
Last Six Nations, the French not only broke the record for the number of tries scored in a single tournament, but they also had the most line breaks, the best conversion rate of line breaks leading to a try, the most 22 entries, the best conversion rate of 22 entries leading to a try, and the highest proportion of tries scored originating from their own half. There's a reason that Louis bielle-biarrey and Damien Penaud are the 2 most try-scoring wingers in the world.
So another side fact about France is that both teams, men's and women's, in my opinion, have the best goal kickers in the world. Obviously with France, you know, it's Thomas Ramos. With the women, it's Morgane Bourgeois. Another thing that those 2 have in common is they both play fullback, which is unusual.
Point number 4, pressure. A word that you will often hear used about French rugby is chaos. How many times on social media have you seen a mad clip from the Pro de Deux? Everyone saying, oh, French rugby, it's so chaotic. But actually, I don't think chaos is the right word to use to describe French rugby at all. Last season, whilst the URC, Super Rugby, the Premiership were all breaking their records for the most tries being scored, the top 14 was just keeping steady. And I think that's because of the amount of pressure French teams put on their opposition.
Don't underestimate what you see on the field with that defense system. Let's call it their chop and top technique is absolutely phenomenal. You know, the first guy does damage, second guy comes in over the ball, takes away the offload opportunity, slows the ball down. Good fold, everybody's square off the line. The spacing's good. You know, when they fold, they don't get caught narrow.
And I think this is backed up by the number of defensive rucks that France hits. They hit the most of any team in the Six Nations, despite not making the most tackles.
When you're coaching defense, you want to make something of everything. You want to make something of getting off the ground. You want to make something of the speed with which you fold, the speed of which tacklers get up and reload on the blind side, the speed with which your 12 and 13 splits when they get onto the edge so they have numbers.
And the stats tell us that this is successful. Not only is the top 14 the lowest scoring league out of the Big Four, but in the last Six Nations, France had the lowest percentage of 22 entries against, leading to a try conceded.
My name is Chloe.
I'm Justine.
We've been to how many women's matches?
This was our second match in person, but we always watch on TV.
And yeah, it's amazing. My friend's South African. Unfortunately, they're not doing very well.
We're not doing that great, guys.
What do you think of France?
France have kept it alive, they've kept it going, and they've been scoring, so, you know.
Yeah,
France.
France are doing really well.
What do you think is the main difference between France and South Africa in this game?
France aren't dropping the ball.
I feel like South Africa aren't making the tackles, like France just keep breaking the line and going. Like, it's
I feel like South Africa seem nervous for once, which I never normally like this. Subscribe to HG Rugby, best rugby channel in the whole of England.
And finally, point number 5, size. size. Now, we all know that size isn't everything in rugby. We can all name plenty of smaller players who pack a real punch. But let's be honest, size does help. And France has some of the biggest athletes in the sport. In fact, last year, they came close to being rugby's first ever 1-ton pack.
From up here, you can see how impressive the French athletes are. Particularly their backline, so tall, so rangy. In the women's game, they really stand out, and it's the same with the men's.
And these days, they're really leaning into it as an advantage, as seen by the adoption of the 7-1 split. What that shows is with their size, they are now bringing strategy. And we see that best in their set-piece stats.
Second try for France, extremely impressive scrum. You know, not many people do this in the springboks. You have to give them the credit, and then it's a simple crash ball 12 over the try line, job done.
In the last Six Nations, France had the highest scrum completion percentage. That means that French scrums were the least likely to collapse. They also had the highest line-out win percentage, which allowed them to exert their dominance at maul time. France had the highest maul win percentage, the most maul meters per game, and the highest meters per maul. And this just wore their opposition down to breaking points.
And again, skills. If you look at, I think the two props, Gros and Antonio, amazing skills. The way that they put balls out the back. I think Gros actually played a double pump, then he put it out the back, which was impressive. And if you look at what the defense does in front of them, they just hesitate for a moment and it puts the next guy into space.
So the scoreboard is getting a bit ugly for South Africa now, but I have to say, massively impressed by France. This is the best I've seen them play in a long time. Just clinical, all of their best attributes. The speed, the precision, the understanding between them, the organisation. Very impressive, very impressive.
So I hope you found this video, if nothing else, thought-provoking. If you did, please leave those thoughts in the comments section down below. Subscribe if you haven't already. Enjoy your rugby, and I hope that everybody's team wins. Cheers.